Welcome to another rendition of Radio Tipping Point. And today we are going to take an interesting path where we are looking at chaos from different angles, and things that actually should be quite regimented, but because of the way that we look at things, we'll have some elements are displaced on one side, and then you have other elements that are displaced on another side, and this matching of things becomes extremely difficult. But I'm very fortunate to have Rabia with me again today, who is going to bring some insight into this idea of how do we bring these pieces together in a meaningful way, meaningful, especially for those human beings that have been neglected in all forms. And I'm hoping that we are able to create a conversation where we're capable of sharing some hope. So, Robbie, again, thank you very much again for joining us. And perhaps if you can start by giving us the narrative of the situation with these displaced components, and how you came to this idea of this displacement on two sides. What kind of realization did you get out of it, and how are you trying to approach coming up with some sort of solution to bring all these pieces together? I know that was a mouthful.
Thank you, and hello once again, and thank you for hosting me. A while ago, I came to the point where I noticed, as we mentioned in our previous shows, about element cycles. And after a while, I noticed that when we break element cycles, we also see some people are being forcibly displaced from some regions, or there is an immigration wave happening from that regions.
Maybe if you could help refresh my memory of how you define this concept of element cycles.
Since the beginning of this planet, the amount of water was the same, the amount of carbon was the same, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, they were all the same. Nothing has changed about the amount of them, because we didn't import from space something else. I mean, it happens rarely that we have a meteor coming and a bit of elements with it. So now we talk about, yes, it is the first law of the thermodynamics. This energy it only changes the forms, but it is always there. Nothing disappears, and nothing happens from nothing. So this element cycle in last couple of 100 years changed its places. We talk about water scarcity. Doesn't it sound weird when we have the same amount of water here? So it seems it changed its places, but does it do it by itself?
Perhaps if I can kind of piggyback on some of these things that you're talking about, Robbie, of course, that you're completely right. We still have the same components. So how come we have this problem? Well, we have the second law of thermodynamics that comes into play, and this is a question of entropy, meaning that it doesn't always stay in that state that you started in. It is not a static, it's dynamic. And so it doesn't mean that the water is gone. It only means that it's taken on different forms. But the real problem is we as human beings have this funky idea that, of course, apart from the fact that we're trying to control nature, and in time, I think, is always the key issue here, because we don't have any time to wait for nature to do what nature does. So we try to put it onto turbo with technology and all kinds of other methods. But the real problem of this element cycle you're talking about is that what's left of that, of what we do, nature has no way of moving at the same pace to correct those mistakes that we're making as human beings, and that is the problem.
Exactly. Because nature needs a patient. And as human beings, especially modern human beings, we don't have patience because we are living so fast. Information, we got it in a second, live, directly at the moment. We want to eat, we order it, it comes to our home. We don't even have this patience for waiting the chef to cook with the best quality fruits and vegetables from the regenerative farm. We don't have patience for the plants to grow in their own pace. We want to eat strawberries in winter, tomatoes in winter, while we are eating cabbage in summer. We want everything at the time we want, but we want everything at the time we want, at the place we want. But when it comes to empathy towards nature, it has its own time, it has its own place. And we have lost our respect to the rhythm of nature.
I want to make sure that we do not. I'm almost afraid I derailed our conversation, so I apologize for that. I want to make sure that we covered this dynamics of the various displacement taking place, especially looking at the human beings, and perhaps if you can describe. I know you were in the process of doing that, so I apologize. Of what that realization was for you, because obviously it's not like you woke up one day and all of a sudden you realize, oh, this is the way it is. This is usually some sort of journey that we take. Perhaps if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Of course. One day I was reading this article about scientists are trying to find the trace of life in space. So they were searching for carbon. That was the moment. I said, what is wrong with us? We keep blaming the carbon in this planet, and we are looking for carbon outside of this planet. It is the same carbon. We are so, we would love to own a diamond, which is carbon, just, different bonds of carbon. But we keep talking about carbon emissions all the time. This is not something that we invent. It is the same carbon, just changing its place, its time. And the thing is, like, it's supposed to be in the soil. It's supposed to be under the ocean, not in the air floating. And also, what about my body? I am the carbon. And how can I blame it? I need carbon. Carbon is really essential for life. Carbon means life. That's why they are searching for carbon. That's why they are searching for water in the space, because it means there has been life. So carbon means there has been life, there was life. And water means there is a potential of life for the future. So these are bonding carbon and water, they are just like a timeline. One is beginning of life, and the other one is showing the potential of life. So we are looking up to the sky for this, or down to the sky for this, the way we think circular. But what about here? So how can we discover things that are far away from us when we do not discover our own reality, when we don't know anything about our own home? Doesn't it sound weird to you if I say, oh, Michael, you have the bookshelves in your room, and your house is with 2 rooms and 2 bathrooms, and then you ask me about my house, and I say, oh, I don't know how many rooms do I have? How does that sound to you? It sounds weird, and it sounds like, okay, this is my business, I need to know my home better than yours first to understand.
Can I piggyback on that idea? If I look at everything that's taking place around me, very often I'll stay with that analogy because I really like this one. I will never have been to your home, but I will assume that I already know how your home is set up. And that's even worse because that we don't know how our homes look like. Okay, not a good situation, but I can understand it, and best I have an idea of how I can correct that. But what I can understand, and where the correction has to be much more dramatic, is if I have somebody who's making assumptions of what my home looks like and have no clue, they've never been to my house. And in fact, they've never been to my house. They've never seen a picture of my house. They have no idea where I live, the actual location per se, but they know everything. They know everything. And so and I think there's a we can close the circle on going to space and why we look for these things in space, because we're already making the assumption that we don't have it. Right?
Yes. I can understand the curiosity. I mean, it's so symbolic that we have also the curiosity that was sent to space. I can understand the curiosity of human being because I'm also a human being. But I believe it is something that became kind of our way of thinking, I guess. It's also the same with when we help someone. Like when we need help, we are still trying to help the others. It is something, it gives us a clue of our nature. And our mentors are like, when you work in the social impact field, your mentors are warning you, your mental supporters are warning you, like, you need help, you need to recover yourself first to help the others. It is all about, like, you need to put yourself in the center. And we come to this philosophy of ikigai. When you choose a job, you need to also benefit from it, benefits of society, what you enjoy. You need to find this common place. But when it comes to practice, we are kind of missing that we are diamonds. Diamonds are valuable. Diamonds are carbon, and diamonds are valuable. So I started to think that I'm a diamond. And I want to know more about myself, my world, my home. That was the moment when I said, something is wrong with this. It's all about element cycles. It is not only carbon, as like we choose carbon for green gas emissions as equivalent when we give our reports. It's always we talk about carbon, but carbon is like, you cannot, tomato is not potato. So these calculations are kind of, yes, I can understand it eases the process to report, but for the companies, for for every single action of ours, actually, like we as individuals, we also have emissions. But what about replacing the things? We change their places. Like we grow food in rural, we ate it in urban, we put it in the bin that stays in urban area. And meanwhile, we are talking about soil becoming dust. We need more fertilizers for the soil called NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So when we look at the human waste and humanure, we can find that nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus in it. This is in our trash bins, waiting there to, they are missing their home. That's the thing. Like, imagine you are a person, somebody took you out of your home, out of your land, the place where you call home, where you feel yourself meaningful, valuable, visible. You feel useful. And then you end up in somewhere else. They force, like, you are forced to be there. You don't know what to do. And you don't, I mean, if I were a molecule of an nitrogen in the bathroom, in the toilet, I would feel in that water would be, I don't belong here and I don't want to harm this water. I'm not supposed to be in the water. And if I was water in that hole, I would think, I'm fresh water. I don't want to end up in somewhere else. I don't want to end up in the salty water. This is not where I belong to. And I don't want to harm. I'm the life. So this is, I know, extreme empathy towards some different types of waste. But really, inspiration is inside of us. Inspiration is in our intestines, in our digestive system. Inspiration is in our farmlands. So then I came to the point of the immigration issues, like someone who is coming from an immigrant family and married to an immigrant partner, and see all those traumas. I started to personalize the elements. And now I feel their traumas, actually. Because imagine that water is here. It's old. It's so old and wise, and for ages it's here. My ancestors drank the same water. Dinosaurs drank the same water. It is the same water. Can you imagine the knowledge, the wisdom at the level of molecules that water carries? Water is something that deserves our respect.
Thanks for that, Robbie. I think very often that we have within nature this self-correcting module that which is the ultimate of sustainability, right? If you have too much on one side, then it's overcompensated on another side, so we were able to come up with a balance. But we as human beings have this funny way of taking that of what's already in nature. We stir the pot in a way that everything kind of gets messed up, right? And we're really talented in doing that. And so when I think about this idea of displacement, especially concentrating on human beings are displaced, and that's something that you talked about, that there is that natural habitat where these people come from. That's quite clear, and that yearning to go back to where you actually fit into the puzzle. I'm just playing with some of the metaphors that I've heard from you over the last few conversations. And then, of course, because that situation's mixed up, and because it doesn't fit into the puzzle that we have specifically here in the West, that it's almost impossible to bring these pieces together. So I know that you not only do you think about this subject quite a bit, but you've tried to bring the connection between the human beings and those things with nature, and obviously the problems that we need to solve. And you had alluded to an initiative that you wanted to set through in COP29. Perhaps if you could tell us what you were planning to do there.
Yes, I was planning to do, but it seems like I won't be attending. It was about, like, the title of the project would be From Displaced Elements to from forcibly displaced elements to forcibly displaced people. People are the elements.
Mm-hmm.
So today, I believe that two worldwide global issues we are facing with and causes us big problems, both sociologically, environmentally, meanwhile financially. So we keep, we keep sending all our funds to these issues, but we are not treating the root reason, like the core of the problem. We are just being symptomatic. This won't work. And the thing is, we are losing our, like, not losing, economy is also circular, but we are doing something wrong there. I mean, there are citizens paying taxes in some other part of the world, and there are certain funds that are getting funded by all the people, and those funds are being sent to immigrancy issues, and at the same time, some local people somewhere, they're worried about themselves, and they are they are afraid of the unknown thing that is coming to them. And it is totally normal. Like, we are all scared of the thing that we don't know. I mean, I did my PhD in Germany. At the beginning, did I face racism? Of course. But I ended up in the Bürgeramt when I was leaving Germany. They told me, like, don't go. Why don't you stay here? I'm from Turkey. Even back then, I mean, we all know the situation. And I asked why. At the beginning, even when I was getting those little number tickets from those machines when you wait in the queue for something.
It's your number to take a place in line.
Yeah. Even for that, like I had lots of Nordic friends from Nordic countries, from different parts of the world. The machine even gave me the last number. And you know what I did? I said, thank you, machine. This is a great machine learning they did to you. And I'm proud of human mind, really. Or there were people who left my table. They were thinking that I'm Spanish or Italian because because of my look. And after a while, when they learned where I am from, I was alone on at the table. These things all happened to me when I was there. But at the end, how I left, all those people became my friends. All the people who judged me without knowing me end up to become my best friends, that we start to collaborate together. And even the police, they told me, like, why don't you stay here? You speak German, you contribute to our society, because I did lots of volunteering there too. And they told me this: either you're not Turkish or the people we have met are not Turkish. So this shows the sociological issues, how we couldn't, and we still cannot handle the immigrant issues and immigration issues. There is something wrong here. None of the it's not the immigrants' fault. It's not the people's fault in general. Like, because imagine we have a big spaceship coming to our backyard. What would it be like, the feeling? We would be scared. We would be curious. We would be worried. Like, it would be a mixture of feelings, and it's normal because it's about our brain. The first reaction to the unknown thing would be scary, being scared of that thing, because you don't know and you need to protect your physical body. Like, all the animals would do that. Even the plants would do that. It's totally normal reaction. It's about protecting yourself. And we are human, like, we need to think about our first reactions and give the secondary reaction when we filter it from our brain. But collective cannot do it by themselves. So we need to see the core of the problem.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, because we gravitate towards the symptoms and really never look at the root cause. That's quite clear. I have one question for you. From the displaced persons that, due to war or the economy or whatever the reason may be, that they become displaced. That part I follow. But maybe if you could describe to us the other side of the coin of that, I'm going to call them displaced systems, but I might be wrong here. If you can maybe illuminate into that, that would be great.
I will keep going on with questions if you allow me, Michael.
Sure, of course.
Can you tell me which parts of the world has conflicts and people are immigrating from?
Oh, the list is long. If I think about the situation that I am most familiar with, and that would be Austria, that obviously Syria would be number one. We've had some traditional that have been for a long, long time, although I tend to think for the most part they were the more educated, and that would be Iran, which we have a very strong Persian community here in Vienna. And then we go back to the wars in the 1990s in the former Soviet Union or in Russia, primarily in Chechnya, when we had the first wave in the 1990s, and then after Putin came into power, we had another wave. And we've kind of been in a time warp, especially with the Chechenyans. I hope I'm not going to make any enemies with these comments. It's just my personal observation that we have never been able to figure these things out. So in my mind, when we talk about this displacement on two sides, I have to go back to your metaphor with the puzzle, because the pieces of the puzzle don't fit, and they can't fit the way they are, but we need to figure out ways to get the pieces of the puzzle to fit, and that's really our challenge. Sorry, I went much farther than what you were looking for as far as the information, but I thought that it would be good to at least illuminate it from my perspective how I interpret this.
No, thank you. It was really helpful for the conversation. So we are like the geographies that you have mentioned, they have something also in common, except the conflict about resources.
Okay. Oil is one. Within two, I would think lack of water would be another one. So you have to help me along.
Yeah, that was the right answer. Oil, which leads us to carbon sinks. It is million years old carbon sinks under the soil. So can we see the relationship between immigration issues and carbon sinks?
Interesting concept. Yeah, I could think of some more. When you paint it that way, I could even think of some other examples. The most obvious one would be Iraq, where that was. So it's not necessarily in the newspapers these days, but if we go back maybe 15 years ago, that was tremendous.
And today, when we talk about our environmental impact, what is the number one problem that we want to change? Fossil fuels. So can we see the relationship between these two? So it cannot be coincidence.
No, but I think it's quite interesting, because the real issue, quote unquote, is global warming. And so we think that by eliminating the use of fossil fuels, that all of a sudden this problem will go away. And I don't buy that. I don't buy that, because I know that these problems are much more complex. And in fact, when we talk about the subject of global warming, we're really back to that analogy that I talked about earlier, where nature figures out how to overcompensate an imbalance so that we get back to that steady state. And so that's all the global warming is, that nature is just reacting to the overcapacity that we as human beings have supplied. But that overcapacity is not just tied to the use of fossil fuels. It's much bigger than that.
It's much bigger than that. Today, only the 6% of the world's population lives in the Middle East, and it's getting less and less. So, as I told at the beginning, I believe that there are two types of carbon sinks. The alive, like, it's not I believe, it's the reality. The ones that are alive right now, and the ones that are dead. So I can say active and passive carbon sinks. So the passive carbon sinks supposed to be in the deep of the ocean and in the soil. And the active carbon sinks, that's us. Once upon a time, it was dinosaurs. But what is the highest population of living creature right now in the world? We are carbon sinks. We need to see ourselves as carbon sinks. And what happens if you keep removing the passive carbon sink from the soil and not put it back in the soil? Because it's a reserve, supposed to be there. It goes to the air. Meanwhile, since the soil cannot preserve and have as much as carbon that it is needed in the soil, it loses, it is, how do you say it? It loses the capacity of holding the water. And when there are these carbon sinks, because it's a life form, it used to be a form of life once upon a time. There are also the other minerals, such as, again, like calcium, phosphorus, potassium, which we use as fertilizers today. So do you see one thing, that our on the ground active carbon sink is moving its destination now? So it's just a basic timeline. Once upon a time, there were live things in this planet, alive things in this planet. Let's give the example of dinosaurs again, and mammoths, or whatever, like the trees. It's the same. Like, we all know how natural gas and oil happens under the soil. It needs time, And there is a relationship between passive and active carbon sink. The circle's supposed to stay there. It's the same when we talk about community building, and we talk about the innovative solutions for economy. When we talk about, circularity, we keep talking about like empowering the local communities. Local. Like, we talk about supply chain, again, we talk about local. We talk about agriculture, we talk about sealing the carbon in the soil, the water retention, Do you see the relationship between those two? So where the future oil will be then, there's also another thing. Since we are the biggest carbon sinks, wherever we immigrate, there will be the future oil. And those conflicts will happen in that areas. So there is no you and me in this game.
And I'm hearing you talking about something that's very predetermined. In other words, that we know if we follow this path, these would be the results. And I'm not on a very transactional way, but in a very spatial way, looking at hundreds of centuries and understanding where things came from, how our development is taken place based upon those things that took place before, and to what degree our current actions play a very important role of what's going to happen in the future. Within that analogy, though, there's one component that we haven't talked about within that model, and that is the acceleration that has taken place, which makes it even more crucial that we understand this properly, and that we need to come up with some measures immediately, like yesterday or the day before, to counteract that. Again, going back to this idea of nature always striving towards this steady state, we as human beings need to figure out a way of doing that as well. We have to be very cognizant of it. We have to understand. The importance of system thinking and understanding the way that these things move. And we need to have a dialogue on a different level. And we need it now.
And we need to see each other as diamonds.
Oh, completely. Right. If we see everybody as being valuable, then we will not waste human life.
It is both human right, it's both element cycle, it's both.
Oh yeah.
It's all about we. It's about finance at the same time, like, because when we talk about the finance of the oil, so like let's not be blind and see the things simple. So the solution is in the problem. What if we give the carbon sinks back to those area and regenerate the ecosystems? If they would have enough water, would the people leave? If they would have enough on-ground resources, would they go for underground resources?
Mm.
Because you need work. You need to make your living. You need access, food, water, resources. If you cannot find it on the ground, you go under the ground.
Mm.
And also there is, when we see the relationship between these two problems with the fossil fuels, immigration, and carbon sinks, we also see another solution. Is the fossil fuels real problem, or it is the problem of using the million years old carbon sinks under the, like, carbon sinks of the earth and not giving them back?
There was a film that came out a long time ago. It's called Field of Dreams. And within this film, there was a phrase that's still used as a meme quite often. If you build it, they will come. So my question for you is, following that of what you described, knowing full well that we need to take a proactive approach in actually creating that habitat so that people feel like they could recognize their home again. Do you believe if we build it, will they come?
I do. Everybody miss their home. Do you believe that if we build the Garden of Eden, the deers will not come to drink water from the rivers there? It's just like the law of nature. Where are the resources? There are the living beings. Like, look at the geography of Europe, the landscape of Europe, the trees, the forests. Like, why Europe? And also the people of Europe, where did they come from and why? Like, it brings us back to, Attila, this big immigration. And when we look at our mythology, it's deep, it's really related. I mean, Turkish people left the Central Asia for some reasons, and it talks about climate change, actually. Lack of resources. And we also need to understand that there is no difference between any living things and us. So our basic behavior are the same. Like today, we see that dogs can communicate via using these keyboards and say the words. So it means they understand the language. 20 years ago, they were saying that it's only about the tone of your voice. No. So you see, maybe at certain level we are different, but we are all the same in elemental level. And we need to see that. And we need to respect each other.
we shouldn't confuse the means of communication with the actual communication per se, and not make the assumption just because I use a different mean of communication doesn't mean that I don't understand you. And that one's key. I'm always very sorry. Go ahead.
Can I give you an example of it?
Sure, please. Yeah.
A Japanese scientist had a project about the memory of water, and he told the certain things to water in different parts of the place. Like to one, he said the bad words, to one, he said he showed his love, the other one, different feelings. And he took pictures of the water molecules. And the thing is, when you look at those pictures, you feel that inside of you, like it's annoying you when it is something bad. And you feel joyful, it looks beautiful. And considering the age of the water in this planet, and the percentage of the water in this planet, and percentage of the water in our bodies, and also in the bodies of animals and plants, yeah, the Tower of Babel was true. We lost the most important communication language with all each other. That was the first language. And I believe it was empathy and respect.
And I'd like to think that it just because we've misplaced it, just staying with your analogy, if you misplaced it, then the most logical solution is to look to where you got it in the first place and bring it back, right? So, as I'm always very cognizant of time, and I knew this was going to happen because it happens every time that we're getting close to the end, but I would like to leave our audience with something very concrete, because very often we think that, oh, these problems are insurmountable and we cannot do anything about it. And the fact is, looks quite different. We as individuals can always do something. We could always do something. Now, it doesn't mean that we can change the world on our own, although some of us will think otherwise. But at the same time, if we look at a number of small actions covered by numerous amounts of people, then the impact of that is huge. So I'd like to leave our audience with something positive that they can take from our conversation and feel that they can start deploying this immediately. So I'm kind of putting you on the spot, Rabia, but I think that you are up to the challenge as I know you. So perhaps if you can describe to our audience those things that you think that we can actually do immediately as human beings, where you do not need permission, you do not need instructions, you just need to do it.
As I always say, put everything in its rightful places, including elements. And also try to see each other and everyone as diamonds, because we are all carbon. Carbon is not guilty. Carbon is life. And also, I want to ask the scientists to work on this passive and active carbon sinks and relate it with immigration issues. That would be so nice, because, we can think, but the scientists of the field can put the analysis of the results. And I would love that if somebody would work on that. Really, it would be really useful for the planet. And fossil fuels are carbon sink. So let's think about it. That's all I ask.
No, that's truly food for thought. I'm very appreciative of that, and especially that last point of making that a challenge that you're giving to the scientists to build the analogy between these different components, understanding that they are very much connected, and that the only way we're properly going to solve any of these issues is that we first acknowledge that they're connected, approach the solution understanding that they're connected, and measuring the effect of our experiments, quote unquote, based upon the fact that we need to take a holistic approach. Because that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about establishing a holistic approach, and that means that our measurements have to also be holistic, that we need to come up with different ways and not this reductionist approach, right?
Also valuing the indigenous cultures and their way of thinking, because they know the best of their habitat. And this knowledge comes to me via my ancestors too.
Sure, of course, because that is, I go back to your description of how you talk about us drinking the water that was drunk centuries ago, that we're talking about the same water. And if we agree that knowledge is something that is the components of our cosmos, that actual knowledge is the components of our cosmos, then that makes perfect sense. And that would mean that the real issue is just being aware, I would say.
Yeah. And also, if anyone wants to collaborate on the subject, any scientist or institution or an individual, I'm here to collaborate about it.
Okay, well, that sounds like that's a very clear call to action, and so we'll ensure that message is passed out at every opportunity. And as mentioned, I knew that we would get to this point, and we are getting to this point, dearest Rabia. And so perhaps if there's any other closing words that you'd like to share with us before we end this session for today.
Regain your empathy towards everything and see everything in a holistic way.
Sounds like wonderful worlds.
Put everything in its rightful places.
Mm-hmm. Great. Rabia, as always, thank you very much for your pearls of wisdom. And again, you've given me all kinds of food for thought so that I can continue during my day and really contemplate those things that you talk about. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. I'd like to thank all those that let us indulge in taking time from your day. We also hope that you were able to come up with some added value. And with that, we look forward to the next opportunity, because, you know, Rabia, we might sometimes have to put things on pause, but that does not mean that we have discontinued the process. It just takes different forms. I'm just staying with your second law of thermodynamics here.
Thank you.
All righty. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.